And we have got today's guest, which we are so excited about, is Lucy da Silva. So Lucy has qualified as a psychologist specialising in addiction, and you were one of the first to set up one of the psychedelic wellbeing centres in the UK. That's correct, isn't it?
Indeed.
And we've been speaking, and honestly, she is so empowering. So we cannot wait to educate and bring this podcast to you today. So welcome, Lucy.
Welcome. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, ladies.
So tell our listeners just a little bit about your background, how it started, and let's get in deep. And
yeah, I mean, oh gosh, where do I start? So yeah, I'm a qualified psychotherapist. I have a master's degree in psychology. My specialist area is addiction and eating disorders, and everything that falls within that field. And yeah, I started working with clients one-to-one as a psychotherapist, and I had a practice on Harley Street after I qualified. But then psychedelics came into my world, and we'll get to that, when we speak a bit more. But I could never have imagined that was the road that I went down, because I myself am over 10 years in recovery from alcohol and drug addiction.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
That's amazing.
Achievement. And also bulimia and anorexia as well. So I've certainly had a rough road.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so when I got sober, it was 2 stints in rehab, and I never would have thought that I would be working with, what I call medicines. Other people call them drugs, and it's fine. You can kind of call them whatever you feel is right for you. But I came in through a 12-step program, which, if people know about what that requires, it's no mind or mood altering substance, to consider yourself sober.
Yeah.
And of course, now we're, a bit further along the line with regards to, psychedelics and what they can achieve. And we've now got, lots of people that have come in through the 12-step program, got sober, that have had addiction issues, that now are exploring psychedelics, for their recovery, for their mind expansion.
Yeah.
There's so many different areas that people are now looking at it. There's lots of trials going on, at Imperial and UCL in London, and lots of other really reputable universities that are, just discovering what these Indigenous communities have known for thousands of years. We're not really advanced when it comes to this. They're much more advanced than we are. So that's my belief anyway. They've got it pretty right. The stuff that they do in the tribes. But yeah, I mean, I think it's probably relevant to talk a little bit about my background, and how it came to, going through what I went through. And, the main caveat really for people, to the listeners, is that most of these issues that we face, addiction, OCD, bulimia, all the things that we can kind of have to be careful here, but I'm not going to be careful.
Yes, let's get it out there.
But, we can label stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I think that in our 3D reality, that can help. It can be very helpful. And I feel like for me, I sit in 2 camps. I'm a researcher. I'm very scientific. I love academia. We're actually doing a research project in the business at the moment where we're looking at we work with ketamine lozenges. I'll go in to talk about that a little bit more. How they can actually work with people with addictions, and the idea is that we're looking at how do we build out these programs to make sure that the right type of practitioners are involved.
Yeah.
And also, when it comes to the most important part, which is integration, because the medicine is a catalyst. The real change comes with the integration, which is behavioural change, like the holistic side of things, which is what we generally do. And, I think it's really important to understand, how if these psychedelics are coming into the mainstream, they need to be done, really safely and held. So, we're looking at that at the moment. I've kind of lost my train of thought.
No. To be fair, I just want to ask,
just to clarify to the viewers or the listeners, because I know that there is people who'll watch this and have probably never heard of what a psychedelic is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So just expand a little bit on what they actually are.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people would think when we talk about like ketamine and stuff like that, that, oh my God, they're talking about Class A drugs.
Yeah.
Not realising that obviously these Class A drugs still do come from a medical background, like your ketamine and stuff like that. Obviously, the other drugs are completely different, but they are still plant-based, aren't they? But it'd be great to obviously explain, because people are probably thinking, okay, these are pushing ketamine on people now and not realising.
But also people might not understand what a psychedelic is either. They could be thinking, well, what's psychedelic? So it's good to deepen it a little bit if you don't mind, please.
Yeah, of course. So, you've got... So ketamine is there's two trains of thought really. A lot of the field actually looks at it in different ways. Some people think that it's not a psychedelic, and some people do class it as a psychedelic. But ketamine historically was used as, and it still is, as an anaesthetic in hospitals, and for pediatrics as well as up to like your older generation. So it's an extremely safe medicine to use. And what they discovered was that, this is a bit of anecdotal information, but what they discovered was people were going in for, various operations and procedures. They were having, an intravenous ketamine.
Yeah.
And then, before they were coming into hospital, they were reporting as being like really depressed or highly anxious. And then when they were coming out, that it was not completely gone, but they were sort of seeing there was a bit of a pattern unfolding.
And I love how you just said that, because I watched, I think it was a series somewhere in America, and they were treating like depression and anxiety people with like really, really like manic depressives, and they were sending them down to, I think it was like South America, and they were doing the trials with this doctor over there, and they were being put into like induced comas with this ketamine, and then they were coming out completely different. But it was like you say, a controlled controlled way that they were doing it. Because I think a lot of people watching this, because obviously you're from a medical background, we're medical backgrounds, and they think that we're talking nonsense, but these are there is studies to prove this.
So much. There is so much, and, I still get...
Actual studies, by the way.
real studies.
In the comments, it's going to be link.
Yeah. You know what? And I think that's great, because people, it's good that people can be educated on this, because the amount of times I said I'm a ketamine therapist, and people are like, oh, that's horse tranquilizer. I'm like, oh, well, actually it's used in all veterinary surgery.
Yeah.
But so you've got your different types of psychedelics. You've got plant medicine. So, ketamine is a man-made synthetic medicine. And then you've also got your plant medicine, obviously, that grows out of the ground. Yeah. And, psilocybin, which is magic mushrooms.
So would this be like when people say they go and do like ayahuasca camp? So obviously I heard a lot about this. A lot of people, when they get into the spiritual world, they'll be like, oh, I'm going to do ayahuasca. It's one of them where I feel like I'm not truly spiritual yet, but I'm so scared of it.
I'd love to do that.
Would you? Yeah. I would shit myself.
Is that where they start being sick and that after it? No.
So I think there's a couple of things, isn't it? I think there's ayahuasca campo.
Yeah.
Campo. I think that's frog poisoning.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that.
But I think ayahuasca is the really one where you go to the tribe. And like
you go outside and then you'd be sick and stuff. I'm sure is it not that?
I'm positive.
So
it could be.
I've worked with ayahuasca myself. So yes, ayahuasca is what is in the community is called the grandmother medicine. So it's very, very powerful. And historically, yes, you go to a tribe, you sit with a tribe, and they give you the medicine, and it's in a very safe container. Obviously, if you go to the right place, because a lot of these medicines now, people are starting to work with them that don't have, the full knowledge, of how they should work really with the spirit of the medicine, because it's a very, you can't put into words what happens when because like I said, I've sat with ayahuasca, and you have to be safe, you have to be contained, you have to be ready for it. There's lots of people that are saying, oh, I'm just going to go and do ayahuasca and all my problems are sorted. And it's like, that is literally, again, it's just a door opener, because what you really need to then focus on is integrating the experience, that actually it's it can re-traumatize people if it's not then contained after that as well, because the medicine continues to work for days, weeks, months, years, and not like in a psychoactive state, but in a way where, you know, you will consistently delve into layers, because the medicine, when they say that when you drink ayahuasca, it stays in you forever. So the idea is that, you know, the grandmother is always going to consistently sort of revisit you, and layers will come up, and you have to be prepared for that. You know, you can't, these medicines are incredibly sacred and very, very powerful. And, you know, you mentioned Kambo as well. Kambo isn't psychedelic. It's a medicine that causes you to purge, basically. So they call it the vaccine of the jungle. So it's used to completely reset your entire microbiome, your entire, you know, gut system, and you know, it can have mental health effects as well. You know, but it's not for the faint-hearted. It's actually quite disgusting. Like, I've done it 4 or 5 times, and it's hard work. It's hard work.
Do you know what I love, Lucy? Because do you feel like it's funny, isn't it? Because obviously you're literally a qualified psychologist. So I think if I was going to do something like this, I'd want to be under the protection and, like, obviously the well-being of yourself. But do you find that obviously with this type of stuff, is there a little bit of wellness that maybe is unregulated because it's not mainstream yet? Because I can imagine there's so many camps you can go to who haven't got the support and the qualifications that you've got. And then is this where we fall into people going into severe mental health because they're not in a safe container whilst doing it?
Yeah.
And the knowledge and the background of it, because you think, like you've just said, if you go and do it and you're expecting to walk out a brand new person, but that isn't really the case, and then you start getting your layers coming up, then you would panic, wouldn't you? Like, you've not got the tools, they've not all got the knowledge to guide you afterwards, whereas if you know what you're talking about, you go to someone legit, obviously you get the full experience. So I read a book, what's her name, who was married to Will Smith?
Jada.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's her that's done this that we're talking about, where she went and visited, like, a lady who was fully qualified in it. And I think she did it. And when I read the book, I've wrote it down in my notes in my phone. That's why I said, I want to do it. Do you know when you read something and I thought, I'd like to try that. And it's probably been in my notes now for about a year.
You do know it's on. So, oh my God. Nic does the little, every year she does a vision board, and she always gets through it. And I know you're going to do it this year.
That'll be on it now, because you've brought it back up, because it's been sat there and I've not touched on it, and now it's just been brought up. I'm like, that was a man up.
Yes. You should go and do it with Lucy, because is this something you hold, Lucy?
I predominantly work with the ketamine.
Okay.
The psilocybin, which is the magic mushrooms, ayahuasca, all of those plant medicines, they're not actually legal in the UK. Okay. Generally you have to go somewhere else. Although there are communities of people who work underground, right? So, and what it's underground means that, you know, you'll get 2 different camps of people. So you get the people that haven't got enough knowledge of it, that just went to a retreat and they're like, now I want to serve ayahuasca, or now I want to work with magic mushrooms. You get those types of people, but then you'll also get qualified psychedelic psychotherapists, psychedelic facilitators, people who have been away and trained and sat in the jungle and done the dieta and know the medicine, that decide to work underground. Because, you know, there's and I've watched your podcast because I see you go down some rabbit holes, and I'm all for that, because I genuinely believe that the government, the people that sit in power, these elites, they know what will happen if we have access to these substances, to these medicines. They know that, you know, that we don't realise actually how powerful we really are. And actually these medicines, you know, they should only ever be used as door openers, as catalysts, because we can access all of this stuff ourselves. You know, the medicines, I believe, have been put here. I don't know by who or where, or, you know, maybe some other beings from other worlds or whatever. And I truly believe that you know, I believe a lot about past lives, and that, you know, that we live many lifetimes. And I believe that, you know, there's no mistake in life whatsoever. There's no coincidences. And I do believe that these medicines were placed here to give us the opportunity to see how powerful we really can be. But they are only catalysts. They shouldn't, there's people that are using these medicines and they'll go and they'll use them over and over and over and over and over again. And it's like, well, you're missing the point because, these are actually supposed to be like ayahuasca, for example. I sat with ayahuasca, when was it? A couple of years ago.
Can I ask your experience, what it was like when you literally did it? Because I'd love to know, because I'm shit scared of it, but I'd love to know, like, when you drink that medicine, what happens?
Oh my God.
Do you know what I'm actually going to ask you before that, because it'll probably lead into it, because I know a lot of people will be watching this and what they don't realise is obviously we're touching on spirituality and subjects, but most people who are like the big names in spirituality now, like Carl Jung and stuff like that, these were all obviously psychologists that come down a spiritual route to open up. And it's similar to like your career. You went mainstream psychology into spiritual psychotherapy and psychology. I mean, and I think a lot of people forget that how educated some of these spiritual like leaders are now, shall we say. So I'd love maybe to how you probably, I'm guessing you went to ayahuasca and that's how did you come from mainstream psychology into kind of this big open world that like is so unknown to people? People are like, oh my God, because I'd love to probably the listeners know that, and then how your experience with ayahuasca and how you fell in love with it and wants to really like be like, look, we can heal the body without mainstream medication. Because what I am finding is we've all worked in the NHS and it does an amazing job, but there is a lot of people now who are pulling themselves away from mainstream medication into like obviously, social prescribing methods like meditation, and then possibly down a plant medicine route to heal themselves. They're looking at that natural way. So it'll be interesting to see how you kind of pulled from mainstream into this new world.
Isn't it interesting, and I will answer that, how you've just made a really interesting point of, we go, we study, we do academia, and this is all academia, science, it's all man-made. It's all man-made. And then we eventually find the spiritual path, which is what you just said, meditation, breath work, even cold plunges, all those sorts of things. And actually they don't cost money and they're not created really by humans. They're all free. It's a spiritual path. So I find it really interesting that you've got your likes of people who study, like Brené Brown, for example, right? She's I'm assuming you've heard of Brené Brown.
No. I'd love to know about her.
Oh yeah, she's just so interesting. So she is, and she still is, but she's an academic researcher. She's based over in the US, and she went down the road of studying. She was very scientific, and she studied shame. And what came off of that really was stuff around your emotional world, your regulation, your spiritual connection, all of those things. And, she's another person that has started out, being very sciencey, and then, she's gone into that spiritual world. And you do see that pattern where people, they study, you get that knowledge. And I think there's a massive place for science and spirit. They're one of the same, really, in my opinion. They really are. But I feel like science, academia opens up that world to tread that spiritual path. So for me, I feel like my segue into the spiritual world was academia. It was, and I'll tell you how I got into that, because my background as a child was incredibly traumatic. I suffered a lot of abuse, sexual abuse and physical abuse and neglect, homelessness, which then led me to go into addiction, to be bulimic and, just really rough start. But I say that, I really, really believe that if the lowest that somebody can go, when you start to transmute that, when you can ascend from that, you can serve someone on the other side of the coin, equally as high, I guess, that you can go. Because when you've really been at the lowest, you can relate and you can connect with people so deeply, because you're like, yes, I know how that feels.
The empathy's there, isn't it? And they do say a soul that's meant to come and change the world will come with the hardest starts.
1,000,000%.
And it's such a beautiful way to look at it.
Yeah. And I do also believe, and I've said this for a long time, that addiction is yes, it's a mental health issue, and and I think these diagnoses really can help. But I really do believe that people that have addiction issues, particularly to alcohol and drugs, they're seeking what their soul knows, right? And what I mean by that is, and again, I'll go sort of towards the past life stuff. When we have galactic families, I believe we have galactic families, and, we all do, we are of such a higher dimension. So we vibe, we vibrate, and we have, our frequency is unconditional love, joy, passion, all those beautiful things. And we choose to come into this existence as a human. And this is material. It's heavy, it's dense, it's 3D, but our souls are just energy. And they're light. And I think that when people go into addiction, like really deep addiction, we're seeking that joy. We're seeking to feel, what an alcohol or drug can give us, and I really do believe that the strongest souls are meant to have addiction issues. And, and then when we come out the other side of it, that we can truly understand why, we went down that road. But I feel like I'm kind of digressing a bit.
It's good to kind of tap into, because so many are going through it from the dark times of COVID, that you are seeing a lot more people with these issues going on, because we went into a dark place in the world.
And did you pick up on that? You said your soul knows.
Oh,
and I've got it.
My God, yeah.
So I have that. We've just opened, I've just opened a Pilates studio where I work. And the main quote of that is, your soul knows, listen.
Of course.
So when you said that, then I was like,
so aligned.
It is. It's so true.
Yeah.
And the quote itself, as soon as I saw it, it just caught me eye. And it's all, I kept thinking, that is so true.
Yeah.
I need that in. That is, I've just had a quote made for a while with it.
Oh,
I've got it on all my mats. So I love that
it's beautiful branding that you've got there,
Yeah.
especially when you come to do probably like a Pilates class and you're seeing it, you just think, you're
lovely.
awake up.
But yeah, it's so true.
Your soul does know.
Yeah.
And we get, so caught up in what our mind tells us. We're so conditioned to think. Our brains are matter, and they are only in this lifetime.
Yeah.
So, when people say, oh, I'm torn between my head and my heart, it's because your heart is your soul, and your soul knows. And your head is saying, oh, no, because conditioning, I've learnt this, BBC says that, and the radio says that, and people say this, and, that's what our brain tells us. And that's why we have mental health issues, because we get caught up in that.
People don't realise till the age of 7, it's not until we then start to learn our own ways. All the way to age 7, we're programmed with other people's beliefs and stuff, aren't we? That people don't realise that. So tell us about ayahuasca.
Yes.
I
we keep kind of skipping around, but I mean, I was going to sort of talk a little bit about how
you
I
got
went into
absolutely,
psychotherapy,
yes, please,
and then what led me to that. So touching very briefly on my past again, and I had a really rough upbringing, and I was on my own at 16. I had to find my way, and I'm actually a professional singer as well. So my medicine comes through my voice.
Wow.
When people hear me sing, they've always said, "Oh my God, you sound like you're an angel." And I've been told that.
They're going to want to listen now.
We're going to have to find you singing, because you literally. But you do, when you do hear spiritual singers, because there is a lot of them out there, especially when you do like yoga or you do meditation, they'll play a lot of singers who are very spiritual backgrounds, and they just have this harmony and this frequency to the voice that it hits you right there.
That's exactly what it is. It's a frequency that taps into our soul. It's like that kind of is like light language, and activating things through that way. I truly believe that when someone is gifted in that way, people say, "Oh, you sound like an angel," just off the cuff, when actually what I've discovered through the work that I've done and clients that I've worked with, clients have told me in my journey, I've been told that you're an angel. Wow. That has come through these medicines. A client particularly sort of came round from her ketamine journey. She said, "I've got to tell you something. They told me to tell you." And I was like, "What? Who? They told you?" And she went, "Well, because," and also I believe this as well, we can connect to different realms through these medicines. That's what they're made for, or that's what they can do for us. And she said, I was told that you're an angel, and your purpose is that you go, when you leave the earth, you go, you come back, you go, you come back. And your purpose is to heal people. And you do that through your work, through your voice. And yeah, it's so interesting because I've been told that many times. So
I love that.
It's been a theme throughout my life. But yeah, so I, going back to I had a rough time, and one of the things that also I've noticed I've been able to do in my life as well, which also comes down to the power of the mind, is I've always been able to, and we use manifesting so much nowadays, and I don't know if that is really the right word to use, but I've always thought a lot of the time, I want to do something and I'm going to do it. And however, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'll do it. So when I was a little girl, I used to go to Butlins a lot, and I'd see the red coats, and I remember saying to myself at 10, 11 years old, I'm going to be a red coat. That's the first job I want to do as an entertainer. As soon as I turn 18, I'm going to be a red coat. And obviously, I was sort of homeless and stuff. When I was 16, I didn't have any support, and I was on my own, and I was sort of almost like waiting for my 18th birthday, waiting to apply to be a red coat. Turned 18, and the first thing I did was fill out an application form. and I had nowhere to live. I had nothing to my name, but I was like, I know I want to do it. I'm going to do it. And I filled out that application form, got an audition, and I got the job. Amazing. And I moved down to Somerset, and for me that felt like an initiation of really seeing what I was capable of doing, because I'd been bullied and downtrodden for all my life, and I'd never really been around people that got me, that understood me. And when I went to Butlins, I was around people that got me, and that was the pathway of me starting to explore, entertaining, and, and I traveled a lot. I did singing, I worked in Spain and Cyprus, and, I lived a little bit of a kind of littlest hobo life. I didn't really have like a home, but I loved it,
Yeah, you were finding your way.
I was 100%. But in all of that, I also then discovered alcohol, which was, to become, my downfall. I say downfall, but, never really is. But, and kind of lived my teens traveling around. And then in my 20s, I got into a corporate job. And I always knew in my soul that I had more to give. I had more to offer. And then at 30, I landed in rehab. And I really believe that in, decade ages of our life, so like 20, 30, 40, 50, we have huge events that happen. And I look at my life, and that's exactly what's happened to me. At 30, I ended up in rehab thinking, God, my life is over. But it really was the beginning of everything for me, because I knew I didn't want to drink or take drugs anymore. Like that for me was like, I can't function. And I remember, turning up at the rehab, and I'd been on a bender, like a 2-week bender, and I was just a mess. And I'd never been helped by anyone, I'd never been supported, I felt really alone. And I remember the therapist coming into the room, and she asked me at the time, she was like, could you tell me what's been happening? And, obviously I just completely broke down. And, she took hold of my hand. She said, we're going to look after you, and that's the first time anybody had ever said that to me. Yeah. And I just completely crumbled. And so, I went through a detox, and, it was the beginning of my journey into this sort of spiritual path. And They say a lot, don't they, that it's not the breakdown, it's the breakthrough, and I really believe that was my first breakthrough. And I saw the therapists working in the group, and I thought, that I was just in awe of them, because, and they're all ex-addicts themselves as well. So they understand addiction. And I had that moment where I was like, that's what I want to do. Yeah. I know I want to do it. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I didn't have any qualifications. I'd left with like 2 GCSEs. I didn't go to college, didn't go to university. Again, not because of my abilities, because I just had no support, I had no opportunity to do it. So, I left that rehab. And then about 18 months after that, I had a relapse. I went back into rehab. It wasn't the right time for me to start the path of the psychotherapy stuff. I had to focus on working on myself. But after that second stint, I knew right now feels like the right time. And but again, like I just didn't know how I was going to go about doing it. And I was speaking to a friend who had been in rehab and was also walking the path of sobriety. And she was doing a master's course at London South Bank. And I was just like, oh my God, how? Like I really saw myself as one of these people that is never going to go to uni, is never going to have a family, never going to drive. Like all those other people do that stuff. I had no self-worth. But again, in me somewhere said, I know I want to do it. Yeah. And so I said to her, how have you got on this course? And she went, oh, I've got a bachelor's. And I just said, oh, I'd love to do it. I'd love to, that course. I was like, wow. So it was a psychology master's degree, but specialising in addiction. So a whole plethora of learning about addiction. And she said to me, the course leader is really lovely. Why don't you get in touch with her and see if you can go and meet her and get some advice how you get into the field. And I was like, I don't know if I could do that. I can't walk into a university. And she went, just do it. So she went, I'll put you in touch. So she put me in touch with, her name was Jackie Lawrence. She's now passed, actually. She wonderful woman. So put me in touch, arranged a date to go and meet her. And I turned up at university. And I was sat in the reception. I was thinking, oh my God, I'm so out of place. Like, I felt like I didn't kind of belong there. But then on the other side, I felt like I did as well. Yeah. She came into reception and honestly, she had hair out here. She was like, she didn't look like somebody, a professor or someone that you'd place at university. And we sat in her office and she just said to me, like, tell me about your background. Why are you interested in becoming a therapist? And for me, I was like, I'm just going to talk about, my addiction and how I survived and what I've been doing and going to rehab, doing the 12 steps, becoming sober. And I didn't expect anything from it at all because I was thinking she's going to give me some advice. And she did. She said, read these books, research, all these sort of things. I recommend you go and do a foundational course, an evening course. And I walked away thinking, God, what a lovely woman, and she was so wonderful. And 2 weeks later, I got an email from her saying, I'd personally like to invite you on to the master's course to be a student. But you've got to think, don't you, like, we can all have these GCSE pieces of paper, but there's nothing like the experience, especially going into a job where it's people face forward jobs, do you know what I mean, like nursing, like psychology. You only get to be the best of that is by literally life experience that's brought you there. And if you've lived it, you know it. You can sort of put yourself in their shoes and be their support. How would you, so let's say people are going to ask, well, psychedelics, is it easy to get addicted to them when some people are coming on from addiction side? How you'd need to come to someone like yourself to manage that, wouldn't you? Yeah. So you're exactly right. I think what's really important to say is, I think I mentioned this earlier, but the only official psychedelic that is legal in the UK to prescribe and work with is ketamine. And so ketamine can come in different forms. So you've got your intravenous ketamine, which is like your kind of gold standard. You've got your intramuscular ketamine, and then also the intranasal, which is up the nose, and then you've also got lozenges. So they kind of go in tiers in terms of the bioavailability of them. So how much they, I think you both know bioavailability, right? Yeah, I can see it. Because you come from that background as well. Nurses, so they have varying levels of bioavailability. The really important thing is that you find a practice or a practitioner or a centre. Well, like us, for example, we're all trained to work with the medicine, but not only trained to work with the medicine, but we also know how to integrate it really well. So the medicine is the element that can be used to create quicker change in the regions of the brain. So the what's called the default mode network. So the DMN network is responsible for fight or flight response. So if you go and see a therapist, it's and look, I say therapy is amazing. If that's your starting point, then start there for sure. But what can happen is if you have any kind of memories that you're triggered by, you can go into your version of fight or flight. So fight, flight, freeze, flop, fawn, all of those things. And that prevents people from going towards what they're being triggered by, depending on the level of trauma or the OCD or whatever the diagnosis is. And what ketamine does is it dulls that down. So, especially when you're working with the lozenges, which is what we work with, what that does is it allows, when you're journeying with medicine, it allows the person to feel like for the first time, they can actually become the observer of their situation. So whether it's trauma or whether it's a memory or whatever it falls into. And then what happens after that is that they'll journey with the lozenge. And then and in that, it's the set and setting that's really important as well. So the therapist or the guide, the sitter, will hold the space for the person to journey. There will be carefully curated music, the environment. It's everything around. It's the scent. Because in our centre we have a specific scent in the centre. You walk in and people are like, oh God. And straight away, they feel like this feels good. This feels like very homey. It's non-clinical. And then, you go into your room and it's all set up. The lights are dimmed. You've got what we call our nest. It's like a long bean bag that you just lay on and you get enveloped by it, weighted blanket, eye mask, and then you have the right kind of music. Again, frequency. I sing to people in session as well. We do sound healing as well in sessions. We can do Reiki, although actually, interestingly, Reiki doesn't really work with ketamine because it's an anesthetic. So energetically, you're kind of almost numbing out. Yeah. And so the energy doesn't really come through. So to your point, when people say, oh, yeah, but or ketamine, people are just going to come and they're going to get addicted and they're going to want to come back to use, the ketamine because they're addicted to it. And it's like, well, it doesn't, the intake process is that you have to see a psychiatrist first. Amazing. To be prescribed. You have to have quite a rigorous assessment to be qualified for the treatment first. Yeah. And then when you are then qualified and the medicine is prescribed, then you have a whole treatment pathway. I mean, the very basic one is 6 to 8 weeks, so you have to go through a therapeutic process. You meet your therapist, you go over what your intentions are, and then you go through at least six journeys. So that's over a course of about 6 weeks. Yeah. And after every journey, you have 24, 48 hours afterwards, you have a therapy integration session. So you then process what came up in that journey in a very safe container. So, to your point around, can people get addicted to that? They're in that particular treatment pathway, you have to invest time, energy, money, all those things to achieve that treatment pathway. Yeah. And so, you're not really going to get people come that just want to have a go, that just want to have an experience. And, and actually we've treated ketamine addiction with ketamine therapy, which almost sounds quite, counterproductive, right? But it's not, because the ketamine people use street ketamine. Yeah. They'll use it in an addictive fashion. They'll use it for they want to get off their head because they want to use it addictively. Yeah. When you're using it in this setting, it's under very, very different, set and setting, people, all the things that are involved. So, we've heard about Matthew Perry, and what happened with him. So incredibly sad, and he was having the intravenous treatment over in the States. But what happened was that people got involved that were very, underhand. Yeah. And he was illegally being prescribed this medicine. And it's really sad because the people that were around him treating him, they should have been taking care of him. Yeah. They should have been helping him to integrate the process. To the red flags around addiction is that, we have a lot of the processes in place to show when somebody is not ready for the treatment, because not everybody will be, So it's it's appropriate for a lot of people, but not for everybody.
Well, I love that. And I think, do you know what, that's a gorgeous way to finish as well, because I feel like, do you know, ayahuasca is probably a similar setting in how it would be done. But I just feel, because your business model is with like kind of ketamine, kind of rehabilitation, how would people find you? Because I feel like that's a beautiful way to finish the podcast and introduce the business and be like how do people come and find you to be able to go on this journey?
So our wellbeing centre is in Farringdon in London, and we are called Silva Wellness. So we obviously have our website, www.silverwellness.com, and at the centre we treat people one-to-one, in couples, and in small groups as well. So you can get, there's a varied range of being able to access the treatment in, different ways. But we also work with people in other holistic modalities as well. So you've got our breathwork and sound healing. Amazing. We're forming communities, and me particularly, I tend to work with women more than anything. I work with women to help them. It depends what they come presenting with. They may want to actually, really treat a mental health condition that they have, or they may be a woman who's already been on their journey and they're kind of a bit stuck, and they want to have a mind expanding opportunity to get to a place where, kind of cognitive measures may not get to. So we utilise the medicine to go deep, and I work with those types of women in a one-to-one container. So it's very specialised. So we have different events, free events and paid events, and we just love people coming to see us. We've got a wellbeing cafe as well, and we work with ceremonial cacao, so we're just trying to build out a community as well. So and one more thing to mention as well is that our treatment is in person but also online as well. So we're the very first service to be able to deliver the lozenges in an online setting, so people anywhere in the UK can access it.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much.
So interesting.
Wasn't it? It was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.